There are some seriously big box games leaving this month, and I am totally okay with it. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is games leaving the collection for May. These are the games that are going to be leaving my collection as of May. There are a bunch of games here. As usual, the usual disclaimers and all these things. First of all, I play a lot of games. Second of all, many of these games are good games. It's just a question of I have to pick and choose the ones that are best for me. Do not take any of this to mean the games are not bad. I'm getting rid of some games I really, really like, and some games I want to like but don't make the time to play, and then some games that I'm just kind of okay with. There's going to be a little bit of a mix of everything. We'll go through all of that. Secondly, this, as I did last month, I'm going to be doing the same thing this month. 3 of these games are going to be given over to my Patreons over on Patreon at the $50 level or above. They're eligible for free games as I do these videos, and then there'll be one random game given to the general Patreon. It's not a specific bonus. I just feel share a little bit of the love over there as well. Now, I will say the 2 biggest box games here are not eligible for that. They're too expensive. I can't give those away just casually. But let's go ahead and dive into this. Timestamps down below in case you want to jump to any section, or as well as far as I occasionally get questions as far as how I get rid of games or all that. Well, aside from giveaways or whatnot, generally eBay or Board Game Revolution are generally good game, but the Board Game Revolution buy sell exchange group, they're generally good places to sell your games and to go through a fairly low amount of effort for a decent amount of reward. I have a video linked down below where I literally go through like a 12-minute video start to finish of me selling a game, and it only gets more efficient if you're batching 10, 20, 30 games together, if you have that much, or even 4 or 5 games together. With that, let's go ahead and start off. And the question I have is, do I start with the big games or the small games? Let's start with one of the big games, and then we'll close off with one of the big games. We'll do it that way. So we're going to start with this guy over here, Euthia. Euthia Legendary Collection. Euthia Torment of Resurrection. Euthia is a game. I cover this on the channel, and this one has a whole lot of drama attached to it, and it's a good game. Euthia is a good game. Euthia is a game that I dove into because I heard good things about it, and it looked like a fun game, and I love Mage Knight, and Euthia kind of promised me a slightly more accessible Mage Knight, in a very vague sense. It's not actually Mage Knight. To address the people who are like, stop comparing it to Mage Knight, I know it's not Mage Knight, but it hits the same target zone. There's a reason many people compare it to Mage Knight. It's because it gives you the same general feels while being mechanically totally different. Euthia is a solid game. The problem I have with Euthia is I find the combat to be not that interesting, and I find the grind, every time you dive back in again, to grind to get back to where you want to be so you can continue leveling up, is a lot of work there. I feel it's a game that could benefit from a system where you jump into. Almost, I feel this could benefit from being a campaign game more than many of the campaign games I don't actually play, and I believe there were plans in the infamously cancelled GameFound campaign. I believe there were plans to have that kind of jumping in point to give you that like kind of leveling up step off the bat. I think Euthia does a lot of things well. This is one of those games that is highly rated by a lot of people, and then a lot of people are like, it's not for me. And I completely understand that. That's actually true of the other big box game we'll be covering to later today as well. Euthia is solid. It's just too much. I'm not going to say it's too much shelf space. If I love a game, I make it work. I don't care. I find the opportunity, the excuse, all of that. Euthia is not too much shelf space. It's too much time. It's too much time relative to the experience I get out of it. It's a good experience, one that needs a few tweaks, and unfortunately I don't know if we'll ever see that at this point, given the cancellation of the campaign and the closing of Dia Games, so we'll see what happens with that one. That's going to be Euthia. From there, let's dive into some smaller box ones. We'll come back to the large one at the end, although of course all of you have jumped to the timestamps, so you can skip all that stuff and see what you want. But Picture Perfect. Picture Perfect from Arcane Wonders is a solid game with a puzzle that I enjoy, but elements that take me away from that puzzle. It's basically a game of deduction, but not only deduction, more logic. You have all these people who want to be in certain settings as they create the perfect picture. The problem with this is that those people want to be in the perfect picture, but what they want might be contradictory with what others want. I want to be in the 3rd row. I want to be next to her. I want to be next to him. I don't want to be next to any man. I don't want anyone seeing my face. I want the plant to be in front of me. There's a whole bunch of different options as far as what people's goals and preferences are, and you're trying to make that all work. That puzzle, love that puzzle. To me, Picture Perfect is slightly ruined, not by the memory element. I'm actually fine with the memory element. There's a little bit of a memory element as you gather new cards and as you figure out how, like, what was it again? Did they not want to be next to her, or did they not want to be next to a woman? Because that affects how I adjust this particular setup. So it has all those aspects, and the memory aspect, the logic aspect, I love those. I don't love the fact that sometimes you may see more pieces of the puzzle than I do. On a regular basis, that will happen. There's not a fair distribution of bits. The way things are rotated, the way things are exchanged, there's inconsistent availability of the information. Memory, love it. Logic, well, memory, like it. Memory, I'm okay with. Logic, love it. Inconsistent pieces of information makes Picture Perfect a game I really want to love and just like. From there we have Merchants of Explorers. The Guild of Merchants Explorers. This was possibly the hardest one on this list. Should have saved it for last, but this is possibly the hardest one on this list. Partially because it's so accessible. This is effectively a roll and write that isn't a roll and write. This is from AEG, from All Dark Entertainment Group, and you're going to have this little map over here where you're flipping a card and placing things down on this map. So it's a flip and write, except it's not writing, it's a flip and place. You're placing things down on the map based on this. The Guild of Merchant Explorers, which is a terrible name by the way, and not such a great box either, where it shines is there are these cards in the game, these cards that are epically powerful and make you feel like you're having an epically powerful time as you execute on these cards that break all the rules and let you do a ton of stuff all at once, and it's a very rewarding flippin' place in that sense. The problem I have is that the game it goes through 4 stages of constantly destroying what you built up so that you can rebuild it again with a little bit more accessibility, and while that principle, that mechanic works to me in some situations. I think it was done brilliantly in Small World. I think there are many other games where it's done well. I think the whole game is too short for me to enjoy that. I don't like having all my progress ripped apart, and then I kind of have to go through it again in order to just go a little further, stretch a little further, place down a village on another location, gather another tower. It's a good game. I think it's a solid game. This is easily the hardest one. Easily? This is the hardest one. I don't know if it's easily the hardest one. This is the hardest one as far as the games I'm getting rid of today. I just have too many roll and write games that give me a similar experience, but that I enjoy more and that take up less shelf space. So while I like this game, I don't feel the need to keep it. Next up, we're going to go with an interesting one. Foundations of Rome, but not actually Foundations of Rome, the Garden of Ceres expansions. This is a very interesting one for me in the sense that I think this is the second time I've ever done this. This is the second time where I've liked a game enough, but disliked the expansion enough that I got rid of the expansion. Usually, even if I don't play the expansion, I'm kind of inclined to just keep it, because who cares? What if? What's the big deal? There are 2 times, possibly more, but that I can recall, there are 2 times that I have gotten rid of an expansion and kept the base game that I was like, I'm never going to use that, so why keep it? One time was Kemet Seth. The Seth expansion for Kemet, which gave you a 1 vs. many experience that was actually a ton of fun, just stretched out the game to a 6-hour-long experience both times I played it, which is not the level of fun that it gave me. I'd rather play Twilight Imperium at that point. I've never played Twilight Imperium, I heard good things. I should have played that instead of Kemet Seth until 4 in the morning. But anyways, I got rid of the Kemet Seth expansion. This was before we had Kemet Blood and Sand come out, and so that's one time where I got rid of an expansion because it was never going to get played. Over here we have a similar situation with the Gardens of Ceres, which is the solo expansions Foundations of Rome. I love Foundations of Rome. If you saw my review of it, a huge fan of the game. Huge fan of most of the modules. There's 1 or 2 that I'm a little bit on the fence as to how much value they add, but I like them. I'm happy I own them. I'm not getting rid of them. Gardens of Ceres was one that wasn't for me. It's a solo mode for the game. If you aren't playing the game with other people, I think it's probably worth picking up, but the drop-off in experience for me was such that I will never choose to play this expansion. I just won't. There's no incentive to me to play this expansion compared to playing the base game. The only incentive would be if I'm not playing the base game with other players. In which case, I think it's a decent puzzle, but not nearly the same level of experience. So this, the Garden of Ceres, a pass for me. One that I love the game, don't need the expansion. Next up, we have Mysterium Park. Mysterium Park is the kind of shorter, smaller version of Mysterium. Mysterium's a game that I really, really liked when I first played it. And then I really liked it when I played it again. And then I played it again. And then at that point, it just didn't get played. It stuck around in my collection for another 2 years after that. But Mysterium was a game that for some reason was harder to table than I would have liked. It's not necessarily the most intuitive system. And there are other games that give you a similar experience. Not necessarily better, but accessible, more accessible. There are other games that give you a similar experience to Mysterium that are easier to get tabled. So Mysterium eventually left, not because I didn't like it, but because it just didn't get played. And so I got Mysterium Park hoping for something more accessible, and I think it is. It's been long enough since I played Mysterium that I'm not confident in saying this, but I think Mysterium Park is more accessible than Mysterium. I also think it's not as good as Mysterium. Now, I don't know if this is the natural evolution of time or the differences in the games, because it has been like 6 years since I played Mysterium, so I'm not speaking with confidence here. I'm saying that I remember loving Mysterium. Mysterium Park was more of a miss for me. Mysterium Park was, I'll just play Dixit. I see no reason to dive into this slightly frustrating, slightly irritating version of a simpler, more accessible game called Dixit. Again, I remember liking Mysterium. Mysterium Park, more of a miss. From there, let's go through some more small box games. We have Animal Kingdoms. Animal Kingdoms. This is from Stephen Armini, who made Flip Town, which I really liked. It's a upcoming, well, it's a Kickstarter that ended, but upcoming game. He made Sprawlopolis, which I love, and he made Animal Kingdoms, which I didn't particularly care for. Animal Kingdoms is a game of vying for control over 5 different kingdoms. You're trying to place down these sequential numbers following certain rules in order to get locations in these kingdoms, and it just didn't work for me. It wasn't bad, it just wasn't inspiring either. It was forgettable. Not that forgettable. I played it twice just to make sure, but it was not one that I particularly got out of it. And I feel I'm missing something. Cause like, I know, for example, before you play, love this game. Before you play, phenomenal YouTube channel, you should subscribe. You should subscribe. If you want to subscribe. If you don't want to, don't subscribe. I know they really like this game, and I kind of want to play with them at some point when we're at a convention or something or this, because I'm still wondering if I played it wrong. I didn't review it, so I'm not really worried about that, although this is, I guess, close enough to a review. I should be mindful that I played it right. But I read through the rules again, trying to make sure if we missed anything. It was simple, it was decent, it didn't spark joy the way many of these simpler games can. There are lots of simpler games out there that I really like. There's words. I can't think of any simpler games right now. There's a lot of simpler games I enjoy. There's No Thanks, there's Coloretto, there's that one with the feathers that I really like. There's one with like peacock feathers. I can't remember. Enchanted Plumes, delightful game. There are many of these smaller box games that give you a little bit of a puzzle that are not like deep strategy games, but that I do find immensely rewarding, and Animal Kingdoms kind of felt like it was adjacent to that. It felt like I missed some of the charm that made it accessible and rewarding and enjoyable. It's okay. It's just not one that I feel the need to own or keep. From there, let's go ahead and dive into the boxes are falling. Super Motherload from Roxley Games. Arguably, this is the second most behind the Guild of Merchant Explorers. Arguably. I liked Super Motherload. I thought it was a solid game. It's one that I've actually had in my collection like 3 times. Not true. I had it 2 times. Didn't play it both times. Eventually got rid of it. And I was like, you know what? I have to finally sit down and play Super Motherload. It's been one of those games that I've been interested in for a long time. It's polyomino adjacent. It's not really polyominoes, but there's a little bit of polyominoes pieces as you dive deeper into the earth. A little bit of deck building. I like deck building. All that's fun. Trying to get your gems from the crust of the earth and get these variety of gems and tokens and thingies and rewards and get bombs and use the bombs to blow up even more things and be mindful of the steel plates. It's a deck building, slight polyomino adjacent game of collectively digging down into the earth to get the tokens and rewards that you need. All sounds like an intriguing puzzle. Reminds me a bit of Undermining, actually. I don't know if you ever played Undermining. Undermining's an older game from Z-Man Games that I played way back in the day with my wife. Kind of enjoyed it at the time, but it didn't stick around, so I couldn't have enjoyed it that much. But Super Motherload is a solid game from Roxley Games that I played and I enjoyed, and I just felt that it was going to be the kind of game that was the same game every time I played it, every time I dove into it. Now, to be very fair and to be very, very clear, I played it once. There's a reason there's no review on the channel. It's because I played it once, also because I can't review every single game I play. That would be impossible. I only review 5 games a week, and I play significantly more than 5 games a week. And so, Super Motherload is a good game. I really enjoyed my play. If I were rating my individual play of it, I'd probably call it a 4 to 5. But it had that style to it where I felt that there's not going to be variety to my experience. It's going to be the same puzzle, the same exact diving into the ground every single time. There are boards that are flippable, so you're not talking about exactly the same, and you could use the different decks of cards because they are a little different, but the actual differences in the game experience felt like they wouldn't be there. And so, while I like Super Motherload, and while I recommend Super Motherload, I also recommend it with the caveat that it might be a little samey, and if you find that's something that's a problem, I crave variety. I actually do play my games multiple times, and I like having different experiences on a regular basis, different puzzles being thrown at me, and I just felt Super Motherload was a good game that wouldn't give me the variety I wanted from it. From there, we have Magic Maze on Mars. Magic Maze on Mars. Nothing wrong with this game. I just finished it. That's what I did with Magic Maze. That's what I'm doing with Magic Maze on Mars, although there's a part of me that does want to get Magic Maze back, but I don't think I will. There's too many other games that I need to play more for me to do that. Magic Maze is a game that's not really it's not a campaign game, it's not a legacy game, but it is a scenario-based game. And when I first got Magic Maze, the original big brother to this game, and it's a game of, let's talk about the game itself. Both Magic Maze and Magic Maze on Mars follow a very specific type of gameplay. What they're doing is you cannot talk to each other, you cannot communicate with each other. Instead, you have broken up actions that you each have. So you're responsible for this, you're responsible for that, you can move up an elevator, you can go ahead and move up, I can move down, or in the case of Magic Maze on Mars, you can move those colors, I can move these colors along those pathways, and it's basically a game of trying to figure out, okay, great, I have this assignment, you have that assignment, how are we going to work together without talking to be on the same wavelength? I know that we have to get that there, but you're thinking we have to get it there. Both of them are valid options. Which one of us will actually understand what the other person wants first without talking, ideally? There's a few times and ways and opportunities you can talk, fine. I like Magic Maze on Mars. I think I prefer its older brother in terms of the simplicity of the game, while liking what Magic Maze on Mars brought to the table. Both of them are solid. For me, though, they're games that once I went through the scenarios, once I went through each of the different scenarios, I was like, that was fun, that was good. I had that slow ramp of escalation, and now I'm kind of ready to move on. I could keep playing that final scenario, I could keep diving into it and enjoying the little puzzle it provides, But there's always other games, and something, like I have a video coming up, or already went up, depending, I don't know exactly, talking about the nature of when are you done with a game. And I do find for myself, it's harder to be as invested in a game when I've kind of hit that point. Whether it's campaign, legacy, or scenario-based, if I've gone through those things, I kind of feel a greater sense of completion and a little bit of a loss of the sense of exploration and adventure. So whatever rating the game was as I was exploring and finding new things, it goes down some small amount. Maybe it's not even a full half-point measure. Maybe it goes from a 4 to a 4, but lesser of a 4. Something about losing that sense of exploration takes away from the experience for me, and now makes every subsequent play a little inferior to the last play before it, and that's never a good feeling to feel like the game has gone down a notch. Which is why I tend to get rid of games after I'm done with all the scenarios. Next up, we have Funfair. Funfair, which is upside down, granted. Funfair from Good Games Publishing. Funfair is a version of Unfair that I thought would be one that I kept where I did not keep Unfair. Turns out I'm keeping neither at the moment. You see, both these games, both Funfair and Unfair, are both solid games doing a very similar thing, but they both have different problems that make them just shy of a game that I feel the need to keep. Games that I enjoy playing, but not games that I feel the need to keep. Unfair had the problem that you're building out an amusement park. It's a great amusement park. It's a lot of fun. You're building an amusement park. You're ramping it all up. Very, very solid experience with one small catch, which is the game was unfair. You were constantly playing cards that tore down people's rides, that got in each other's way, and it felt aggressively out of place for the experience I was trying to have, which is to build the best roller coaster you can ever be on. And so Unfair eventually left my collection. I enjoyed the puzzle of it, but it left my collection. Enter Funfair, a game that is giving you a shorter playtime, more accessible game, giving you a lot of the same notes as you saw in Unfair, but it's also more collaborative. It's more peaceful. Those blueprints are still rewarding. Those rides you build are still rewarding, but the variety in the experience is not there. Unfair is a game that they have continued to expand upon and develop, but Funfair is a game where you get the core sets, you get the core deck building. It's not really a deck building game, but you get those cards, those 4 decks of cards, or depending on the player count, decks of cards mixed together, and you have those specific cards in play. And again, it just doesn't give me the variety I want. There's no mixing it up to what it's doing. It's a fun game, it's a good game, but like one of the things I liked about Unfair is the fact that you had different decks with different feels to them, and you'd mix together the pirates and the robots and the ninja and the whatever, and you'd mix all that together, and you'd have a specific deck, and you'd dive into it at a different time with a different deck and a different set of decks, and it all gave you slightly more reason to continue diving back into it. Funfair doesn't have that. So I kind of feel that whichever game I play, you're missing something I like about the other one. In the case of Unfair, I feel like I'm missing the more building up the best amusement park ever as opposed to the tearing things down. And when I play Funfair, I'm missing out on the variety that Unfair gives. Solid games, both of them, but both slightly missing what I'm looking for in a game that I keep as opposed to a game I merely play and enjoy. Then from there we have Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid over here from Renegade Games. This is a solid game. This is number 3. If I'm rating the ones that are hardest to leave. You see, Euthia is good, but Euthia is too much of a commitment. So even though I like Euthia, I like Euthia more than the Guild of Merchant Explorers. Easily. But Euthia requires a significantly larger commitment to play it, and so I'm weighing it, I'm grading it heavier as far as a game that I'll keep. Versus the Guild of Merchant Explorers is easy to dive into. I would say the order here is probably Guild of Merchant Explorers, then Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid, then Super Motherload, as far as the 3 that I want to keep in terms of, I'm not going to, but the 3 I would most want to. Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid, and yes, this is eligible for the whole Patreon giveaway. It's the last one and the first one that are not. This one is just fine. It's a little more expensive, but that's fine. There's always a balance of wanting to give things away and not wanting to say no, but also saying no when you need to say no. So anyways, Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid is a game from Jonathan Ying and from Renegade Games, and it's a game of, well, playing as Power Rangers. You're basically dealing with a little bit of a cooperative engine in which little foot soldiers and bosses and monsters are going to be spawning into play, and you're going to be wandering around the map trying to take them out. The mechanical puzzle of combat I really enjoyed, because when you engage in a combat, what you do is you draw cards from either the footmen in play, the various footmen you're fighting against, as well as any monsters or bosses you're fighting against, adding 2 rows of cards that you have to slowly make your way through by dealing with your own Power Rangers and their specific cards, trying to utilize and combo their abilities and the cards they have in play in order to efficiently dodge damage and take down the enemies and resolve their card rows. The footmen are easy. They're a little irritating, they get in the way, but they're very, very easy. But when you combine the footmen with the monster cards, suddenly you have an actual challenge in your hand. Suddenly you have to sit there and plan and figure out, well, if I use this ability and I do those cards and I add this, we can probably walk away with this taking out 2 of the boss's cards and also negating most of the damage, if any, and that is important. So the entire challenge of Power Rangers comes down to trying to figure out how to combine the various Rangers in battle, their abilities, their hand of cards, against the row of cards you're fighting against. To me, the reason it's not a keep is because I don't like the board or the movement. It doesn't give me a sense of any progress. It gives me a sense of they had to add an element to the game to just make it not just a card play game, which I'm fine if it would have been just a card play game, because I think it's a really good card play game. And then secondly it's like a ton of stuff. The amount of content that this game has is absolutely obscene and insane, and I can't justify owning all that and keeping all that for a game that I like, but I don't love it quite as much. I really enjoy Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. I think it's a solid game and a solid recommendation, especially if you're a fan of the IP. Especially if you're a fan of the IP. I'm not a fan of the IP. I never cared about Power Rangers, never really watched them growing up. I watched the movie, that's about it. And the movie wasn't that memorable to me either, although I don't know if it was supposed to be a good movie or not. I just didn't particularly enjoy it. And so Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid, and I know they just recently had the G.I. Joe version where they slap a different IP onto the Guardian system, which is fine, because maybe at some point they'll hit an IP I like, and maybe they'll tweak that core map a bit. The card combat system is really well done. The rest of the entire package is something I don't mind missing out on. And then lastly, and biggestly, it's arguably bigger than Euthia, depends how you count it, we have Bardsung, Legend of the Ancient Forge. Bardsung. I don't even know where to put this thing. I'm going to go ahead and move these off the table and put Bardsung over here, and we'll put Bardsung there. Great, there we go. Bardsung from Steamforged Games. Now, Bardsung is behind the three I just told you about, although again, I like parts of Bardsung more than I like any of the others to a certain degree. The problem is Bardsung is also, like Power Rangers before it, it's a mixed bag, and it's a mixed bag that's asking me for commitment from me. Bardsung is a dungeon crawler. It's a dungeon crawler with a campaign mode. I believe there's single shot mode. I haven't played single shot. I've only played the campaign so far. And it's a campaign game that asks you to give a lot of time for slow progress. There's a lot of grind in the game, is what I'm saying. There's a lot of, you flip through the adventure book, the story's great, I really like, well, great's relative. I like the story, I like going through the story, I like the interactions, I like the choices you make as you choose which pathway to go down, I like building out my characters and trying different characters. I've already played all 5 characters in the base game box. I dove into a starting campaign and then like reset and started again with different characters, and I'm currently going through 3 characters, enjoying the sense of progression they have along the way. The core combat loop is simple and yet rewarding. The upgrading is simple and rewarding. The game is easy to dive into, easy to learn, fairly easy to get people up and running. Few small nuances as far as some things that weren't necessarily as obvious or as simple as I like. The whole door and portal thing, I didn't find that particularly intuitive offhand. But overall, I thought Bardsung was a solid start. And then the more I played Bardsung, and I covered this in my review, you can check out my review, but the more I played Bardsung, I found that there was a higher ratio of grind to progress than I like. And while I think that might be good for giving you 100 hours of gameplay, I'd rather have 25 hours of amazing gameplay than 100 hours of mixed-in grind gameplay. I like Steamforged games in general. I have liked a lot of their games, and I know that Dark Souls had accusations or problems with grind, and for a while I was like, I just haven't found the issues in their games. I mean, issues is relative. I've had complaints, but I like Monster Hunter World. I liked Horizon Zero Dawn. I haven't reviewed that one yet. I will at some point. I really like Resident Evil. That is absolutely my favorite game from them. And Bardsung, I really, really like parts of it. I like the story, I like the sense of progression, I like the upgrading and building of your characters and having a character who you've built their skills, you've spent their energy, their skill points to level up your stats, to gather new cards, to upgrade the cards you have. I really like all that, but it's not worth the 4 hours of grind in between each of those upgrade steps. Some people I think Bardsung is going to be a great game for. Like Euthia before, there are a lot of people who love Bardsung, and I completely understand why. For myself, I'm forced to choose between Bardsung and playing other campaign games in my collection, and ultimately I choose other campaign games. It's a good game, it's a solid game, and they currently have RuneScape. They currently have RuneScape on Kickstarter. RuneScape Legends, I believe. They currently have RuneScape Legends over on Kickstarter as we speak. I actually arguably enjoy that one more. Depends how you look at it, but RuneScape is more completable. It's a little, we'll talk about RuneScape another time, because this is not the point of this video, but RuneScape I'm actually more intrigued with, something that is on the lighter side, but something that I can dive into with my son and really enjoy it, versus Bardsung was a bit too much for my son, and it's a little too grindy for me diving into solo, and I'm not giving it to my game group as far as the amount of time it will take to enjoy it. And so that's Bardsung, and that's all the games on the table, and that's, well, the video. As I said in the beginning, if you are a Patreon or whatnot, I'll be giving over 3 of these away, not these 2. 3 of these will be given away to $50 Patreons, and 1 will be given to the general Patreon community. Past that, I hope you enjoy this video. These are the games leaving my collection for May. A lot of solid games, as usual, because that's how this works, always rotating through some things. And until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.